Madam President, welcome. Thank you so very much for being here. And Mr. Speaker, we welcome you and thank you so very much for joining us. And we certainly want to recognize the governor-elect. Ma'am, thank you so very much for being with us. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, please join me as we welcome the 74th Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, His Excellency, Governor Glenn Youngkin. Governor, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, sir. Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's nice to know everyone is up and rolling this morning. Chair Lucas and Chair Torian, Chair Watts, members and staff of the Joint Money Committees, thank you for this invitation to join you all here again. Mr. Speaker, thank you for being here. And I'd like to welcome the Governor-elect Spanberger. It seems only yesterday that I was sitting in that chair, and I do wish you and your family a blessed holiday season and a fabulous administration. Thank you. Once again, we come together to discuss Virginia's financial strength and how to best be good stewards of the enormous resources. A biennium budget with $72 billion of general fund resources and $212 billion of total resources. How best to keep Virginia growing? How best to invest in key priorities and capital investments across the Commonwealth? And as I look around this room, I am filled with an overwhelming sense of gratitude. First, gratitude for Virginia's financial strength that has enabled and will continue to enable record funding into critical areas while providing substantial tax relief. Second, because I see so many women and men who have played such. First, our General Assembly partners, thank you, thank you, thank you. And especially the dedicated members of my administration. Thanks to all of you. And finally, for my amazing wife, First Lady Suzanne Youngkin. Every single day, Suzanne makes our Commonwealth a better and a brighter place. Thank you for your tremendous service. When we first came together in January 2022, I talked about the need for us to lower the cost of living for hardworking Virginians, especially through tax relief. Open Virginia for business to create jobs and grow opportunity. Liberate Virginia from overregulation and reduce the cost of bureaucracy. Deliver excellence in education with student-centered schools that prepare students for life, with parents at the head of the table and tremendous support for our teachers. To keep our communities safe by supporting law enforcement and holding criminals accountable. Transforming our behavioral health system that was overwhelmed by Virginians in need. Preserving the vast natural resources that our Lord has blessed Virginia with. And transforming government to serve the people of the Commonwealth. My friends, we have done all of that and so much more. Together, we have worked for and seen Virginia achieve such remarkable strides. We all should be incredibly humbled when it was recently called the Great Virginia Renaissance. A renaissance that we led together and witnessed together. It's a story of transformation, a story of promises made and promises kept, a story of competing and winning, a story of Virginia leading. A Virginia that is stronger today than she has ever been. Over the past 4 years, we've seen record business investment. Today, $156 billion. Record job growth. And in 2023, for the first time in a decade, more people moved to Virginia from the other 49 states than moved away. And all of this is added up to record revenues that have allowed us to provide record amounts of tax relief for Virginians, $9 billion. Record revenues that underpin our ability to make record investments in our most important shared priorities, in education, in childcare, in child services, in law enforcement, in behavioral health and healthcare, in business-ready sites and workforce, and in preserving the Chesapeake Bay. Record revenues, record tax relief, record investments, all driven by a Virginia economy that is strong, dynamic, and importantly, diversifying. Virginia now is leading in sectors like advanced manufacturing. We are seeing that made in America truly means made in Virginia. The pace has been fast and the progress has been significant, and therefore I'm proud to stand before you today to present a budget that incorporates all the aspects of what we have collectively done to make Virginia the very best place to live and work and raise a family. A budget that benefits from this renaissance and one that I firmly believe will keep it going. My introduced budget has 7 key elements. First, it is underpinned by a prudent revenue forecast that reflects a 3.5% compounded annual growth, or roughly 3% after tax policy adjustments. That's less than half the 8% compounded growth realized during my administration. This leaves meaningful upside for the next administration. Second, just like every budget I've introduced, this introduced budget incorporates tax relief for both individuals and businesses, totaling $730 million. It's their money, not government's. And to be clear, there is no need for any new taxes, and there is no need for tax increases. Third, my introduced budget meets the significant funding needs across our shared priorities. Areas such as Medicaid, SNAP, K-12 education, child care, child welfare services, higher ed, public safety, behavioral health, and agricultural best management practices. Fourth, this budget continues to fund key ingredients to keep our job growth and waves of economic development wins going, with 2 critical elements being business-ready site investments and workforce development. Fifth, this budget includes $1 billion in compensation actions for teachers, support positions, sheriffs and their deputies, state police, and other state employees. This amount includes a 2% one-time bonus in 2026 and 2% raises in 27 and 28 for teachers and state employees. 6, this budget, with a prudent use of bonding and cash, supports nearly $2 billion of critical capital projects and maintenance reserves. And finally, 7th, this budget is structurally balanced, coming out of the biennium and for the total of the 6-year forecast period. Our budget begins with our forecast, and our forecast is a prudent one. As I just described, Virginia's revenues have grown at an average of 8% a year during my term. That's 60% higher than the Commonwealth had seen for the last decade. Revenue continues to grow at 5.2% during the first 5 months of fiscal year 2026. This increased growth has been a direct result of the plan we all put in place back in January 2022 to win business investment, to grow good jobs, and to bring more people to Virginia. And we did all of it at record levels. As I said, $156 billion in investment commitments to build and expand. That's more than the 24 previous years combined. With more than 270,000 more people working today, more than 200,000 open and available jobs, and 85,000 more jobs coming, with 40,000 more construction jobs on top of that. Virginia has jobs more than ever. This success was built on streamlining 35% of our regulations, saving Virginians $1.4 billion a year, transforming workforce development, leading the nation in apprenticeship sponsors, building the nation's top-ranked customized workforce development program, investing in business-ready sites, adopting an all-of-the-above energy plan, driving forward great infrastructure at our port, our highways, rail and bridges, and broadband. And most importantly, tremendous work by our economic development professionals and leadership at the local and state level. This high rate of revenue growth should continue as long as Virginia stays with the demonstrated winning formula. Indeed, despite the predictions for financial calamity that was predicted by many this year, and I have to say, many in this room, financial calamity has not happened, and Virginia, again, is running a significant surplus. We worked with the Trump administration to turn back on $2.3 billion of paused grants. And while, yes, there have been federal workers who have lost their jobs, federal job losses have been far less than the catastrophic predictions. 72% of Virginia's federal jobs are in national security, DOW, and intelligence areas that are growing, further buttressed by the NDAA advanced this week. We worked with the Trump administration and brought HUD's headquarters to Virginia and kept the National Science Foundation headquarters. And amidst all those dire prognostications, our AAA bond rating was reaffirmed. All of this is in direct contrast to Maryland and the District of Columbia, both of which have seen significantly higher job losses, and both have been downgraded by the rating agencies. These facts, when combined with massive growth in non-federal government investment, give me great confidence that Virginia should do much better than the roughly 3.5% growth underpinning this budget. If our revenues grow 0.5% faster, at 4% a year, it adds an extra $1 billion over the biennium. And if we grow at 5%, the rate we grew through November, and for the 10 years before our administration, it's an extra $3 billion for the biennium. Whatever the number ends up being, I firmly believe you should have ample resources. Now, I say should because my cautionary message is to stay with the program and don't pass anti-business legislation. Many of the bills that have been filed are bad for business. My friends, Virginia is leading. Don't allow her to become California or Illinois. With this strong yet prudent revenue forecast, Virginia can continue to build on $9 billion of tax relief provided during these 4 years. This has been and will continue to be the most direct way to address cost of living concerns. You should cut taxes, not raise them or create new ones. It is completely unnecessary and bad for Virginians. The tax relief in my introduced budget provides certainty for tax filers by substantially conforming with federal tax law, providing $730 million in tax relief. That includes relief to working families in the form of no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and car loan interest deductibility. This budget is supported by revenue growth and carryover balances from large surplus revenue. We also took a hard look at excess balances and unused and unobligated funding. For example, we found around $100 million in balances from programs and turned them back into the general fund. $32 million from commerce and trade programs, $30 million from health and human resource programs, and $25 million from natural resource programs. I encourage all of you to take a hard look at your similar balances and to do the same. Legislative balances have $100 million in unused carryover balances. I hope we all agree that allowing excess balances to just sit is not responsible fiscal management. Our budget makes our largest incremental investment in Medicaid funding, an increase of $2.6 billion over the caboose in the biennium. For the biennium, general fund Medicaid funding grows to $17 billion, and total funding grows to $59 billion. This is a $10.7 billion increase to what we funded together in the Common Ground budget for 25 and 26 just 2 years ago. To address the rising cost of health care and secure the future sustainability of this critical program, we also introduced responsible cost controls that bring an appropriate discipline to our generous Medicaid offering. Controls that root out areas where we know there has been waste, some fraud, and some abuse. And we bring real economies to pharmaceutical spending through a nation-leading agreement on GLP-1s with a price no higher than $245 per month, saving $151 million. The need to bend down the spending curve through saving strategies has never been more important. On SNAP, first let me reiterate how proud I am of the work that our team did in the fall setting up the Virginia Emergency Nutrition Assistance Initiative in record time so that no Virginian in need would go without support. We know there is a shifting of cost to the state and the localities with regards to SNAP. Our administrative costs are a shared federal, state, and local responsibility. At the state level, for federal funds that flow through Virginia, I propose to take on and absorb all the responsibility for the increase in both the state and local portion and put $100.3 million behind it in my introduced budget. For those funds that flow directly to the localities with no state involvement, the localities should be responsible for their share of the increase. And we are getting our SNAP error rate down. Virginia's SNAP error rate was a little over 11%, which puts us at the national average. And while we were at the average, I don't believe Virginia is average in anything. Based on tremendous progress made in our transformation efforts to improve the local administration of SNAP benefits, there is a real path to getting our error rate below 6%. To buttress those efforts, we've included an additional $3.6 million for SNAP support to further those efforts for rate reductions to be among the best in the nation, not middle of the pack. We have 12 more months to get this right. 15 of 50 states already have an error rate below 6%. There is no reason why Virginia can't get there as well. On education rebenchmarking, this budget provides an additional $544 million in general fund for the next biennium, bringing our total investment to a record $22.8 billion. This includes maintaining our increased funding for support positions, a key compromise in last year's Chapter 725 budget. And when accounting for early childhood education, investments now total $23.8 billion all in. We've worked together. We've worked together to increase direct aid to public education by nearly 50% since the pandemic. and we've shown that investing in students produces results. Virginia leads the nation in recovering from math learning loss. All in Virginia, intensive tutoring works. And Senators Lucas and Locke, thank you for your partnership in that initiative. We have shown that delivering transparency, introducing accountability, raising expectations results in better student outcomes. We made the tests harder, and the students did better. Students are also doing better because they're in school in the first place. Virginia now leads the nation in reducing chronic absenteeism. And we also continue to support teachers with raises. That includes the 2% bonus this year because I think they have done an amazing job and they deserve it. And 2% pay raises in each year in the biennium. I'm proud to say that teacher vacancies continue to decline and are now down over 35%. With 19% pay increases and state support for teacher compensation, cell phone free education across the Commonwealth, nationally leading academic standards, and a teacher licensing process that now works, it is no surprise that vacancies are down, and Virginia was just recently ranked the best state to be a teacher. To fund our shared goals when it comes to early education and childcare and school construction, my proposed budget redirects $137.6 million in VPI non-participation savings to the Child Care Subsidy Program. This creates approximately 6,745 new slots for children aged birth to 5 in each of fiscal year 2027 and 2028. The budget also provides nearly $300 million more of state support for school construction grants. The total authorized for these grants for the biennium is now $519 million. We also know that while our Commonwealth is blessed with many resources, there's no resource more important than our children. And therefore, this budget provides $50 million to transform a child welfare system that must keep kids safe and families strong. A system that now should fund priority responses for kids aged 0 to 3 and not stop at 0 to 2. Centralizes intake, raises pay for local workforce, and provides increased state oversight for underperformers. When it comes to our institutions of higher learning, our focus must be on keeping tuition increases low and meeting high-demand, high-skilled workforce needs. And that is why this budget continues to make affordable access and financial aid a priority. Higher ed funding increases $434 million from the general fund during the biennium, totaling $7.8 billion. This includes providing an incremental $42.5 million to fund affordable access and financial aid, providing $11.4 million more to expand nursing, medical, and other health sciences programming, and increases state support for the VMESDEP waivers by $190 million. $20 million in general fund, $75 million in non-general fund, bringing total state support to $160 million each year. Because we know something that every parent who is trying to figure out how to send their son or daughter to college knows too well, the cost of attending these institutions has still grown too high. And once again, I'm including a budget amendment to cap tuition increases at our institutions of higher education. There is plenty of money in the higher ed system, and they can afford to do this. My pressure over the past 4 years has resulted in in-state tuition increases of 0 in year 1 and a modest average of 2% increases thereafter. In Virginia, we also back the blue. Our commitments to safer communities are absolutely permanent. Today, murders in Virginia are down 30%. Our ironclad commitment to public safety and the men and women of law enforcement has been there from day one, and it is a commitment we continue with this budget. My introduced budget includes an increase of $136.8 million in general funds over the 3 years, with $50.3 million in fiscal year 2026 for increased personnel and operating cost at the Virginia State Police to keep our citizens safe. I tasked the colonel with growing a strong Virginia State Police, and that's what's happened. After 4 years of constant support, we are seeing increases in the number of people who want to be in law enforcement. This year, our trooper school has one of its highest enrollments ever. Another area where we must not sacrifice our commitment is to another set of heroes, the men and women who have sacrificed so much for us, our military veterans and their families. I am pleased that Virginia was most recently ranked as the top state in America for veterans. This is a duty and a responsibility that we must uphold because freedom is not free. In addition to the increased funding for MESDEP, the proposed budget increases $9 million to address startup operation costs for the opening of the Puller Veterans Care Center, whose grand opening many of us celebrated yesterday. This budget also provides $50 million over the biennium for investments in business-ready sites to enable companies to continue to make quick decisions to locate in Virginia. Business-ready sites are a critical building block of our wave of economic development wins. The introduced budget includes approximately $2 billion in new capital authorizations and maintenance funding over the biennium. The projects use $890 million in general fund cash over the biennium and a portion of Virginia's current debt capacity in each year, given Virginia's AAA rating and incredibly strong financial position. $1.1 billion in new debt authorizations over the biennium. This budget restores prior authorized projects that were paused in May, with one omission that should be rectified in the final budget. The UVA Center for the Arts should be included and comfortably bonded in 2028. In addition, the budget funds innovative and necessary new investments, including the Virginia State Supreme Court facility, a dental school at VCU, engineering and arts building at ODU, the Center for Leadership and Ethics at VMI, many strategic maintenance and life safety projects. The budget also includes an ongoing $200 million for maintenance reserve funding. Our revenues are strong, and at the heart of Virginia's strong revenue position is a huge pipeline of economic development projects that continues to be incredibly robust. The current pipeline of mature projects stands north of $30 billion. And I know we've had trouble scheduling an MEI meeting, but as I've commented previously, we have a slate of projects ready to go, with 2 waiting on your action, totaling $1.5 billion in capital commitments and 1,400 new jobs. I'm proud to say that when we've made commitments, we've honored them. But there's also been places where we have continued to disagree, and when we have, we've done so candidly, and so let me be candid. Don't put Virginia back in RGGI. RGGI only drives up utility bills and drives up the cost of living for Virginians. Rejoining RGGI would mean imposing $500 million on Virginians' electricity bills. It doesn't work. You don't need it. And even Democratic governors are realizing that RGGI is a bad deal and are getting out. Don't put Virginia back in. It's also imperative that Virginia remains a state where you have the right to work. Continuing Virginia's economic renaissance starts with protecting right to work. It's as simple as that. Pro-business policies attract jobs. Anti-business policies chase jobs and opportunities away. And right now, Virginia is roaring, and she needs to stay that way. I want to thank all of you for your partnership over these past 4 years. The record funding and record tax relief provided during these 4 years has supported tremendous change in the Commonwealth of Virginia. It's all been supported by a Virginia that is winning, a Virginia that is growing, a Virginia that is stronger than she has ever been. And with great stewardship, Virginia will continue to soar. May God bless you all. May he bless you during this Christmas and holiday season, and may he continue to bless the great Commonwealth of Virginia. Thank you all very much. Now, as I always do, and Madam Governor-elect, as you will do, I now have the privilege of leaving and walking through those doors and leaving things in the hands of someone who I have immense trust and faith in, who has served this Commonwealth incredibly well, our Secretary of Finance, Steve Cummings. Steve, thank you.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm ready. I want one of these.
Secretary Cummings, welcome.
Thank you very much, Chair Lucas, Chair Torian, Chair Watts. Appreciate my 4 years with all of you. It's hard to believe that this is the final presentation I will make to all of you, and I just want to thank you for your hospitality and partnership. This has been an amazing experience. I also want to take this quick opportunity, given that this is the wrap-up, and acknowledging some of the folks who spend so much time on this. First, Money Committee staff, Ann and April, amazing team, worked tirelessly in a great partnership. And then on my team, I would argue we have the best finance team in the country. Others come to visit us to talk about that. But I want to acknowledge my two deputies, Jason Powell, who's known by many of you, John Markowitz, DPB, Michael Mall, and Jonathan Howe, and all their directors. And within tax, Kristen is obviously very well known to all of you, plays an incredible role. And I know you know how hard this team works. You just cannot believe what it's like behind the curtain and how much time and effort and care that they put into this. So I want to thank all of you for everything you do. So a quick check-in on FY25, which you're well aware of, then an update on year-to-date results, talk about the economy, talk about tax policy, and a bit about longer-term outlook, and then I will hand the mic over to Michael Mall, who's going to go into more details on the budget itself. So I've got a lot here. I'm going to try to move as quickly as I can and then open it up for questions. So through the first 5 months of 2026, we've had a strong performance, up 5.2% year over year. And the good news is that is primarily driven by growth in individual income tax. Relative to the forecast, revenues to date are almost $500 million higher than projected. Recently released economic data shows you that we've had a good period of 108,000 jobs added in the U.S. in September, 64,000 in November. October data, which we just got a couple days ago, did decline in 105,000. The observation is that's likely tied into the fork in the road, people who have were offered payouts and has shown up in the data as of October. Virginia payroll withholding, which is the best indicator of the health of our workforce versus job growth and wage growth, has continued to perform well, 5.9% year to date, which is astounding, frankly, versus last year, and ahead by about $414 million. Federal actions have not had the impact that everybody has been calling for a year now. And it clearly, as the governor mentioned, that's related to the 70+% of our agencies in Virginia being in very important national defense and security and intelligence activities. The other element, if you hear Tom Barkin talk from the Richmond Fed, is watch the consumer. That's 60% of our economy nationally. And the good news is that the consumer in Virginia is very, very strong with 5.8% year-over-year growth. Revenue outlook, comparing FY 2025 revenues adjusted for tax policy to the FY 2022 forecast, as the governor had said, we've had an average growth rate of 8%. Last fiscal year, revenues grew at 6.1%, and year-to-date, all at 5.2%. So while it is slowing, I think everybody would agree, given if we were talking about this a year ago, when we actually had a bit of uncertainty, a lot more uncertainty in the air, thinking about our forecast, those are astounding numbers. The budget today that we're going to be talking about requires general fund revenues to grow by 3% this fiscal year. And so with year-to-date performance as strong as it is, we only need to deliver 1.9% growth for the next 7 months. FY 27 and 28 are forecasted at similar levels, 3.0 and 3.2%. If you adjust back for tax policy that is compressing revenues a bit, that would equate to 3.3, 3.5, and 3.6% growth rates in each of those years. After a period of uncertainty around federal trade and tax policy, things have settled down. We now know what those things are as at the current state, and it's not nearly what people had expected what it was going to be. And consistent with that, the U.S. economy has been exceeding economists' expectations, and we have new corporate tax policies that are about to kick in that will be stimulative to further investment and growth. Job growth is supported by historic economic development announcements, which have been astounding, frankly, for Virginia, put it up against any other state in the country. $156 billion in capital investment, 85,000 jobs in new direct and indirect jobs by the end of the biennium, along with 40,000 construction jobs. It's generating a tremendous amount of new activity, and we have a pipeline that goes beyond all the stuff that's already been delivered since the new administration began. With respect to the budget, as the governor shared, we have, with the new revenue forecast, carried forward balances, which I will go through, and other identified resources, an incremental $6.4 billion of general funds from 26 through 28 in new operating and capital spending, while still providing $730 million in tax relief. $858 million of that shows up in 26, $2.7 billion of that 6.4 in 27, and $2.8 billion in 28. Critical investments that we're able to do with all that money, $2.6 billion to Medicaid, while implementing some strategies for bending the cost curve, $1 billion in incremental compensation in the form of a bonus in 26 of 2%, and then 2% salary increases in 27 and 28 for all state employees, teachers, support positions, sheriffs, and state employees. $544 million in general fund to K through 12 rebenchmarking without adjusting any of the ratios adopted last year. Almost $330 million in general funds and $142 in non-general funds for natural resources for the point and non-point source pollution reduction efforts. Also, $2 billion in capital outlay the governor has described, I think, in enough detail, be able to restore the things that were taken out last year. And then $730 million in new ongoing tax relief. We're making permanent the increases to the standard deduction and pass-through entity taxes, increased refundability of the earned income tax credit. We substantially conform to the major tax provisions in H.R. 1 with no tax on tips and overtime and car loan interest on those cars, certain cars that are assembled within the U.S., and then modernizing the Virginia tax code with market-based sourcing and extending the data center sales and use tax exemption. All this is done while we still maintain a combined fund balance of $4.3 billion in our rainy day funds, Virginia Revenue Reserve Fund and the Revenue Stabilization Funds, 15% of the certified revenues. Just a quick look back on where we have come from. You've seen this chart times before, but it just shows you the astounding financial strength of Virginia since the beginning. This is after tax policy, which I will share with you in the next slide. So that dip in 23 is a bit misleading because we had some significant tax impact, but it shows you the conservatism in our budgeting policy for revenues, with the gray bar being the original forecast, then adjustments along the way, and then the surplus that was ultimately achieved in each of those years. Here's the revenue impact from the tax policies that have taken since this administration arrived. You can see if you go to the bottom, which is the total for each year, going back to here, 2023, $27.9 billion, and you can see that that was reduced by $2.5 billion, given the combination of all the things that have taken place. The top through the line that says total permanent tax cuts, you go up there at standard deduction, tax on groceries, refundable EITC, military retirement subtraction, so on and so forth. Those are permanent run rate reductions. Fantastic, going back in the memory of all these things being implemented, great steps that have been taken for the benefit of many. And then tax rebates in those first 3 years of about $3 billion in total. And if you add all of that up between 23 out to 26, that is your $9 billion of tax cuts that will be achieved through this time frame. And it doesn't stop. You can see the recurring pieces of this continue on the tax at the bottom end here, which are related to H.R. 1. You can see that those kick in partially in the first year in 27, and they all will be expiring by the fiscal 30, and I can't remember if anything ties into 31, but those are incremental to what's already been done in the past. So let's quickly look back at 25. I don't need to spend much time on this, but you can see that, and this is on the left-hand box, it's 25 versus 24. The stats on this, just to highlight where the circles are, individual income was up 7.8% year over year for the 25 versus 24. And then at the bottom line was up 6.1% on forecast, the results versus forecast. You can see actually that was $572 million and a 4.1% versus forecasted growth. So very, very strong performance. On year over year, year to date, you can see the actuals again in the year over year growth, fiscal year to date, the left-hand box, that shows you that on the circle, again, the circle withholding for the first 5 months up 5.9%, net individual income up 7.1%, sales and use tax up 5.8%, total revs up 5.2% for the first 5 months of the year. Then if you go over versus forecast for that same period, just focus on the conclusion here on the bottom right, that forecast is up, we're 4.3% ahead of our forecast, which is $483 million that is money in the bank as of that period. So real GDP, excuse me. Real GDP growth remains quite strong. In fact, it's stronger. Recently, the Fed, major economists, major banks have all been upgrading their outlook for GDP growth. And you can see here what's happened. In Q1 of 2025, that was a negative. That was largely import-driven. If you remember, the components of GDP imports are really important, and that's when people were stocking up to get in to stay ahead of tariffs. But then now in the Q2 and Q3, and expectations for Q4, GDP has grown dramatically, 3.6%. This comes from the Atlanta Fed GDP Now estimates. And again, if you do read and just check in on other economists, just about everybody is upgrading outlook for 2026 as we speak. And job gains, while certainly have slowing, we all know that. In November for U.S., they were up 0.6% year over year. Unemployment rate. The U.S. unemployment rate in November increased to 4.6% from 4.4% in September. Big part of that is government employment was down 503,000 in September to November. Remember, we don't have data in October. And the private sector employment was up 206,000 in that same time frame for a net employment loss of 297,000. That evidence that unemployment is capturing that net negative government jobs. We don't have the benefit of what happened in October, and that's when a lot of that stuff showed up. BLS did not collect the data in October, so we're going to never get that number back. But if we look at Virginia now on the left-hand side in terms of unemployment, we're now ahead by 0.9%. And I know we've been watching that rise and tick up in Virginia unemployment rate, and actually tick down a notch in September, and which was the opposite direction of where the U.S. economy has been going. The next Virginia data won't be available until January 7th. Virginia job gains. On the year, Virginia experienced annual job growth of 0.7% in September, which is right around where the national numbers are. September jobs showed a 5,000, you can see on the far right, a 5,000 job decline in August. While August 7,200 gain was revised upwards by 1,800 to 9,000. September's decline was surprising to us because it was attributed to a 5,000 job loss in state government. So we went to DHRM, we asked them for the details on what's going on in state government, and you can see the chart on the right-hand side is actual DHRM for full and part-time as measured by FTE equivalent, full-time equivalents. And you can see actually August to September grew by 2,900 jobs. In September, October grew by another 1,300 jobs. So that we expect that the BLS data will get adjusted for the negative 5,000. That should show up here in the near future. And that actually, if you adjust for this, your actual job gain in that area would net add 8,000 jobs for September. Economic development. You've seen this chart before, really amazing. We're showing this again. This is based upon announced deals since the beginning of the administration. The reason it's a pyramid is that this is the job impact of just announced deals. This was as of September. So we're not suggesting that this is all going to decline. In fact, the governor talked about what's in the pipeline and is still to come. But this is showing announced deals of $156 billion, 84,000 jobs to be delivered through these projects yet to be delivered. 75,000 of those roughly will be delivered in the next biennium. We have 2 MEI projects waiting to be, or projects that are to be reviewed by MEI, and we have a current active pipeline of 30 billion of additional projects that are in process and deemed to be in active stage. They're not just a hokey list of everything that you can think of. And the way we think about this, this is not, we don't say, well, let's just add this on to our economic forecast. But I've talked to economists about this and say, how do you think about this when there's an extraordinary level of new inputs into the system? Because a model will assume there is going to be some growth. But when you do have an anomaly like this that has got this kind of an outsized impact, they would agree that that will show up in some form or fashion and further job growth above and beyond what a normal forecast might deliver for you. So non-government withholding growth has been strong. You can see here that we track withholding payments. These are withholding payments for sectors that can be tracked within tax system. Many things don't fit into a sector, so this is not complete data, but you can see these are the sectors you typically hear us talk about. Withholding payment is in FY 2026, have been strong out of the gate with all major sectors performing better, excluding government and mining. Federal government has been a drag, not surprisingly, during the shutdown, but performed at plus 4.5% prior to the shutdown. And the best performing industries have been financial activities and education and healthcare. Non-farm payroll, this is September 24 to 25. Actual jobs, employment in Virginia, they are up by 0.7%. You saw that before. We're up 0.7%. Nationally is up about 0.8%. And actually withholding collections are up 4.7%, which would suggest that wages are up 4% to get to that 4.7. So I think an indication of a healthy economy where people are still having to pay up to find people to come take jobs. It's not as tight as it was, but at 3.6% unemployment rate, it still is not a loose employment market. Looking at this, unemployment claims have been elevated this year. Partly that's because we're leaving, as we all know, what was a historically tight labor market from coming out of the pandemic. So 24 was higher than 23. 25 has been higher than 24. You can see in the middle of the year, the reporting weeks 27, 29, that things bounced up a bit more, this on continued claims, but continues to be at a level that is below the 10-year weekly average, excluding pandemic timeframe. So it's definitely up. I think you would say it's returning more to what you would think is the norm versus the 10-year average. But continued claims, we think, are the best measure to look at this, and you can see on the right why the initial claims is very difficult to track. It's so volatile. But if you do look at this, and Brian Slater and his team dig into this very deeply, a lot of those spikes can be attached to some very specific actions taken by some major manufacturers over that time frame. It's up in general, and again, some of that certainly is related to some of the federal actions, but in all, it's currently, where you see it back on the right, it's acting pretty consistently with what it was in 24. So this is now looking at continued unemployment claims for Virginia versus Maryland and DC. In the last week before the government shutdown, last data collected, Virginia only had 8% of the region's continued claims that had sent during the shutdown, which is astounding. You can look at the numbers here. 250 jobs for Virginia versus 946 for Maryland and 1,500 for DC. And just on the right is to show you that what has happened to us is very similar to what happened in the last shutdown. And I think, honestly, I've talked to economists about this. They talk about DMV. I've heard people in this room talk about, look what's going on in the DMV. Virginia should not be talked about within the same frame of reference and discussion with Maryland and DC. They could not be more different because of what's on the bottom. 72% of our agencies are in areas that are, I won't say protected, but certainly have not experienced the kind of impact. And with the new defense bill that was just passed, they are slotted for further investment. If you look at the main areas where they're spending, it is a lot of around ships, submarines, and other autonomous devices that are really in the sweet spot of Virginia, not just on the manufacturing side, but also in terms of development that we think is going to be fueling further growth. When you talk to Kathy Warden at Northrop Grumman, she's seen this in spades of the kind of new activity as they're developing new programs that's going to really be to the benefit of Virginia. So I will say on my own, this is not speaking on behalf of everybody, I think that the federal exposure of Virginia will start to transition, if it's not already, into being an asset as opposed to a liability, given the nature and the profile of what is in Virginia. This I know people discount this because they say the jobs don't fit, but they do fit for a number of people. I think this contributes. We've been consistently above 200,000 jobs for the past 2 years of job openings. And I think the fact that we have still a fairly tight labor market, that this is something that is a real asset for the workforce at 1.4 versus 1 for the U.S. We've been sharing this with you also. This is the actual data collected by the tax department, withholdings for federal employees who live in Virginia on the left-hand side, and you can see clearly an impact from the government shutdown as the people were not paid, so we didn't get withholding. Before we went into that, we were running at 4.5% up year over year for federal employees. That's since January of 2025. And then now, not surprisingly, we've had a shutdown affect 2025. We are tracking very closely what's going on with agencies where they saw a real decline in withholding, and we're first to report. And those now, looking at the same agencies, we're starting to see the makeup payments coming in. So we would naturally expect that that gap's going to close here in the near future. Similarly, differently on the federal contractors, very little impact in terms of what's happened in the shutdown, and very little impact up until that point in time that the contractors who pay taxes in Virginia, employees, still seem to be doing okay. Inflation, if you look at this, 3%, that's the story. It's been there for a while. They'd like to see it lower. It's been very stable, frankly. If we look at PCE, that's the one that they watch, and trying to get it to 2%. You know, it's come from very high levels in 22 to get it down to where it is, but we still have work to do, and that's the big debate, jobs versus inflation with the Fed. Consumer sentiment, just to show it, we don't pay a lot of attention to it. We look at what the consumer is actually doing, but you can see, obviously, it's been quite low. It was low in 22. It is now low again in 2025. It's ticked up. We don't typically follow Roanoke, no offense, but that was mentioned in a recent article. I just want to show you where that is as well, that had a slight uptick in the most recent data. What we watch is what's the consumer doing. And you can see here real personal consumption expenditures, that Virginia sales and use tax continues to remain very strong, increasing 3.8% year over year in November. Remember, we're 5.8% year to date, so continues to be strong, maybe not as strong in November. And in general, again, consumer at 2/3 of our economy. This is an important one to watch. This is now, again, you've seen this before, an update on what's happening around the state. On the left-hand side is historic growth rates for sales taxes. This is based upon the local sales tax option tracked by our tax team. And you can see on the chart, and then the right side is the last 6 months. It's not right to look at the single months. They can be very volatile depending on timing of payments. But you can see that actually our three biggest regions, Central, Hampton Roads, and Northern Virginia, are all performing at 7.2, with a lot of that growth in Richmond, as we all know, the Richmond area. Hampton Roads, 2.3%, and Northern Virginia at 3%. So all in all, feels like it's pretty good. Things are continuing to hum along, not indicative of a major problem that Virginia is facing. One other thing is we look at corporate profits. So we took a look at because we've had some real volatility in corporate tax collections. That's made up of a lot of things. People pay on very different timelines. We have adjustments over the period. But if you look at the underlying driver of corporate profits, which is actual corporate profits, you can see here the incredible strength of the S&P 500. We didn't get it in here, but the Russell 2000, which is more middle market companies, more domestic focused, shows similar double-digit increases. And on the right-hand side is showing you what actually is in our forecast. It's at 7.1% for 2026 is our forecast in the face of a very healthy corporate environment. And I mention again that the tax policies that are included in the H.R. 1 are only stimulative to this group with the accelerated depreciation and research. Fed cut rates, you know, that just happened. We're at 3.5 to 3.75, a lot of debate. People are now not really expecting something in January, but if you look at what's implied by the market on probabilities of cuts for next year, it says that the 30+%. The highest odds are we're going to get 2 cuts over the course of the next year, but there's a wide range of opinion on this. And, that's going to be the hot topic and certainly will have an impact on who leads the Fed in the next chapter. I would think would have an influence on that. Sorry. So the point of where we go with revenue sources, we're well ahead on Chapter 725. So an upward forecast is very appropriate for FY 2026. You can see for 725 forecast in the left-hand box, we had a 25 actual of $20 billion. This is now looking at the remaining 7 months, December to July revenues. For the actuals for 25 were $20 billion, 26. The 26 actual forecast is $20 billion, 59, because our forecast was only for a 0.4% increase for the year. Very conservative. And because of where we are to date, the revenues required to meet Chapter 725, the third column, shows that we actually could lose over the next to last column, that we could actually lose 2.3 revenues over the remaining 7 months in order to beat that. So after year-to-date growth of 5.2%. So now shifting to the December general fund forecast for FY 26 through 28. You can see the Gaker forecast is shown in the top line. The growth rates the governor mentioned, 3.3%, 3.5, 3.6. After tax policy adjustments, so that is a total of 730. We have a small item in the 26 is actually a sale of property within VRA, a loan that was repaid by general fund many, many years ago that we satisfied the lien on this year, so that went in as a revenue source, just FYI. And that general fund revenues then, after those adjustments, are at 3, 3, and 3.2% required to meet our forecast. So all of that adjustment here on the next page shows you that this new December forecast coming out of Gaker, where I think we had a robust discussion, but people generally were in line with the baseline that was presented, adds $823 million in general fund revenues in 2026 and $566 million in FY 27 and 28 for a total of $1.4 billion incremental to where we started in Chapter 725. So revenues must only grow 1.9% over the remainder of this year to meet 2026 forecast. That's versus the 3% forecasted annual growth. What's required is 1.9% to meet this, and that compared to 6.1 in 25 and 5.2% year to date. Tax policy. So important that everyone understands this is a phased and targeted tax policy. It is accounted for the revenue impact, and if you go through this, you can see tax conformity, which we'll go through in a minute. That's the 101.6, 149, 183. That's of the 730. That is 433 million. Market-based sourcing, topics we've discussed every year I've been here. One that we feel strongly is an important modernization effort. Unfortunately, it starts the first year with a negative, but in the third year, it starts becoming a recurring positive that is a sustainable positive number, and the return on this is very high. No tax on tips, 25% in the first year, 50 in the second year, 50 in the third. That's what we will apply to the federal policy for the 53. No tax on overtime, similar treatment. And then the no tax on car loan interest for qualified cars assembled in the U.S., which is a smaller contributor. We will substantially conform to H.R. 1 here, some around deductions, depreciation, business interest. Within the provision, however, when we go into some of the business elements, we will not adopt the retroactive elements of the either of the research catch-up and of the special depreciation allowances. You can see these parts of this, the biggest numbers are the qualified property for 50% depreciation allowance and the business interest deduction and the research, which we all fully support. Further supports a healthy corporate interest in coming to Virginia as we can continue to reduce our taxes, bearing in mind every one of our competitors is reducing corporate taxes as a way to compete for their presence. Okay, benefits of conformity, I think you know this. Reduced administration burden, simplifies filing, improves compliance. Priorities here around modernization, we've really talked about this a lot. Again, we think this is, first is catching up with the rest of the country, saving companies that reside in Virginia from double taxation in other places, and very supportive of a big part of the current economy, particularly in Virginia, which is more service businesses, where you actually pay your tax where you deliver your service, not where you are headquartered. I don't think I'll go through these in detail. You all know it. You can look at it for the sake of time. The no tax on car loan interest, I've given you details. And no tax on overtime. Happy to come back to this if you have questions. Permanent standard deduction, EITC. These are already in our budget. Our budget, House and Senate Finance budgets include this. Market-based sourcing. Again, I think I've talked about this. We are on a cost of performance for services for Virginia, and I think the most telling argument for this is if we look at where the rest of the world has gone, that we really stand out as a state that is not participating, which is not to the benefit of our companies and is not to the benefit of our ability to attract companies as well. But you can see the cost of performance was 3/4 of the companies in 10, and over time it's now where 15% of the companies use cost of performance, which is how Virginia currently approaches it. This is what the P&L looks like for market-based sourcing. And again, we all trip over that first year because it is a negative number. But when you get out 2031, it's positive and it continues to grow. So you got to, in the course of the transition, there is an adjustment. There was a working group. This is really important. I think the tax conducted a work group last summer to look at the impact of MBS, and they found that adopting that would generally be positive for Virginia. They did look at and agreed that a carve-out was probably appropriate for the defense and telecom industries, given their unique business models. We've talked to some of those companies, and we understand why, and there is a reasonable argument why they are different. But we've done this on a bespoke basis when companies like CoStar come and say, hey, we'd love to come there, but you don't have this. So we give it to them on request, but it's something that we think should be by right. PTET was in every Money Committee report for about a year. And this is now something that we do believe that this modernizing by making this permanent. So just to remind you, this is under federal law, state and local taxes cannot be deducted beyond a certain level by individuals, but they are permitted to be, are capped, I'm sorry. And so under Virginia law, however, and many other states, you can pay it through your business, a small business PTET entity, and by doing so, paying it and then getting the money back, the state passes through the state, that they are able to get the benefit of deduction at the federal level. And so that's what we're trying to accommodate, has no economic impact on the coffers of the Commonwealth. At the end of all that, shows you a chart I think all of us are so proud of, what's happened on our rainy day funds, where we started, some of the dips that happened along the way. And as we know, as we get to the right, in the budget that you'll see here, there's a planned withdrawal that's already was part of 725 of $675 million coming out of the reserve fund in FY 2026. We also, in the governor's introduced budget, assumed an additional $323 million would be coming out It goes in, it comes out, we end up still with our 15% target, because that's where we believe that we should be, and that's what the budget is built on. You've seen this chart before. A couple quick comments. First of all, where we started, we've been AAA. I did a little research on this, and just a factoid. Virginia, as most of you know, has been a AAA since 1938. The next closest state to being AAA is North Carolina, which was 1963. So pretty stunning record. If you look at this chart, there's one notable change is on the right-hand side. Maryland is still there, but Maryland is not a AAA anymore. They're a AA1, and they've had that since 1993, and they lost it down, put on watch in 24, lost it in 25. And where we think the Georgia data is not in, so we're either 2 or 3, but I think this is incredible. Not only do we have the rating, we have the money in the bank that is standing by should anything happen in Virginia. So, general fund resources. This is where you see all the things that are happening to get us to the place where we have these balances to spend. So you can see starting at the top, revenue 725 in Gaker forecast. You get to, and then tax policy changes, that next line, that's the 730 if you add all that up. If you go into the adjustments to balance, FY 2025, that's the amount reserved from FY 2025 surplus, which is $1,463,000,000. That was excess revenues of about $572 million, and then the set-asides of $830 million from the delay of CapEx and a couple other things, and then other balance adjustments. This is unspent discretionary appropriations. This out of all that came out of that unspent appropriation analysis we do, this is the part that the governor pulled back to put back in the general fund. We have ABC, K through 12, and other, and then the other, I'm sorry, that's an important number. That's where you see the vast majority of that is what's going on with the money being pulled out of the contributions to the revenue reserve and revenue stabilization funds. To get you to the 35.9, and if you go to the next page, which is our closing numbers chart, which shows you the structural balance for the next 6 years. And importantly, what I just showed you all ties in, is you can see down at the bottom, well, if you go at the top, prior year balance in FY 2026 is 13.3. You go all the way to the bottom, which there's a chart I just went through with you, you get to an ending resource level of $2,124,000,000, which carries to be your starting balance up to the top of the next column. That's the excess available resources above and beyond general fund proceeds that are available for appropriation. And you can see just if you track, you go 13, 2124, 2124 to 721, 721 down to 305. That's how we bridge to a structurally balanced point where you can see in the long run that without the benefit of those, this budget works fine. This budget includes increases for Medicaid, and it includes increases for education. It also includes compensation increases every year for state employees. So, in conclusion, current trends are strong. You can see here, we've talked about this, 5.2% year over year, general fund, mainly by individual income tax, and revenues to date were 484 in Chapter 725. Payroll withholding, best indicator of performance, continues to be very strong, as does sales and use tax in the third bullet, up 5.8%. The budget introduced requires general fund to grow 3% this year. That means just 1.9% for the next 7 months. 27 and 28, similar growth rates, 3 and 3.2 when you adjust for tax policy. That's adjusted for tax policy. And we believe that this conservative forecast does put us in a spot to do all the things we're doing and to make sure that we are very comfortable with the status of our AAA bond rating. 6.4 billion of new operating capital spending, while we have $730 million in tax relief. If you look at Medicaid, K through 12, and increased compensation for state employees, those three things account for 2/3 of that $6.4 billion. So that money is being spent in areas that we think are very much aligned with priorities for the Commonwealth. So we feel very good about where this budget is. We think it'll continue to fuel the growth of Virginia, and I'm happy to take any questions before I hand it over to Michael on budget.
Mr. Secretary, we're going to ask Mr. Maul to come and give his presentation. Then after that, we'll take questions because we are tight on the clock, and I'd like to get through our presentations before we entertain any questions.
Sure. Thanks.
A little short here.
Yeah, a little too tall. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, even though the Secretary is very gracious for thanking me for helping put the budget together, I just want to really say, without my associate directors and analysts, I'm nothing. So I want to thank my folks for that. Just pleased to be here, talk to you today. I'm going to focus primarily on the general fund side and the incremental changes. So you see a little more detail. The governor and the secretary actually covered much of what I'm going to say, but hopefully you'll have a little more reference here with some of the materials in my presentation. I mentioned we do have a caboose bill, and there are 30 amendments. It just so happens 15 deal with reductions that are primarily tied to technical matters based on latest data, and they free up about $248 million. 15 deal with spending, of which the biggest places getting that money, Medicaid, which is not a surprise, and also related to a direct aid. I'm sorry, let me start that again. Also going with Medicaid, the Revenue Reserve Fund, which you just heard the Secretary talk about that we had to put in, and the 2% bonus that is for state employees and local government employees supported by the state, as well as instructional support staff in K-12. That is a listing of the savings. I don't, we can come back to this, but this is for your reference. And here's a listing of the spending items. Again, with the top four making up about 77% of the total spending. So I know you all know this, but just to make sure we know, because we only do a biennial budget, once every 2 years. When we build the budget, we start with the amount of funding that you had authorized in Chapter 725 for this fiscal year 26, and we carry that forward to 27 and 28. And in that chart, that is the 32.7 million number that you see there. Now, that reduction, what we end up doing is we identify items that have been noted by the General Assembly and us as one-time items that we can take out. We also, as a technical matter, move everything from our central accounts that were like for salary increases and move them to the agencies. Taking into account the revenues that the Secretary said that we will have available, you net it out, and we're ending up spending up to $4.7 billion in new funding for the biennial budget, and a total of 70.1 for the biennium in spending. Now, the highlights, over 97% of the proposed general fund appropriation increases in current 15 agencies. And I will say that DMAS, Direct Aid to Public Education, and Central Appropriations account for about 78% of the $4.7 billion increase. And so I'm going to go into a little more detail highlighting the key areas. For Health and Human Resources, you've heard that we're putting in $2.9 billion, in the biennium for Medicaid, Children's Services Act, services, and children's health care. But we are proposing some measures to help basically contain cost and slow the growth down and while maintaining program integrity. And that's going to be about $645 million reduction. On the SNAP program, as you heard from the governor's presentation, $104 million to cover the state's share of administrative costs that the federal government is no longer going to cover, and $59 million for the cost of making sure that we are providing sufficient support and increasing the service rates, dealing with the developmental disability waivers and our commitment to that. And then finally, over $43 million, you may have heard a couple days ago, there was a press announcement about our child welfare system initiatives that will increase accountability, strengthen child welfare workforce, centralize child protective services intake, and further, hopefully, child safety. In direct aid, you also heard $544 million in additional funding based on re-benchmarking. I will take this note that because of we started off with a much higher number, which I believe many of you saw during your retreats. But since then, a number of things have happened. Enrollment numbers have come in. They're lower than what had been assumed in the budget originally. Less usage of some programs. We had, because of the great work of our Virginia retirement system, the retirement rates have gone down. So we don't need to put as much money in. And all those things brought the calculation down from re-benchmarking. You've heard about the salary increase, 2% fiscal year 27, another 2% on top of that in 28. I think the governor also mentioned the Virginia Preschool Initiative is never fully utilized. So historically, General Assembly has always taken out the non-participation. Our proposal is that that amount of money should go to enhance the child care subsidy program slots. And you also heard, in addition to what's already in the base, $299 million non-general fund to support additional school construction grants. That is primarily additional literary fund money that we happen to have available at this time, as well as the growing amount of tax revenues from casinos. For higher education, there's a lot there, so I'm going to summarize it real quick. If you combine the higher education funding for increased operating support, financial aid, expansion of health profession education, and accounting for the enhanced interest earnings and credit card rebates that the higher institutions should get, it's a total of about $91 million over the biennium. As is also mentioned, though, one of the biggest items is dealing with the waivers program, particularly the Virginia Military Survivors Independence Education Program, VEMSTEP, that you're all familiar with. A couple proposals there. You may remember that you identified $20 million additional dollars for this year, 26, which will be put in the caboose to support that program and bring it up to a general fund base of $85 million. Will we continue that $20 million in 27 and 28? The other proposal is to propose $75 million a year from balances of the corpus at the Virginia Savers and utilize the interest off of that to go into the VEMSTEP program at hopefully an ongoing way of paying for that and the costs that the higher institutions are absorbing. I will note there's a separate program under SHEV, VEMSTEP stipends. That's always some growth in that. That is actually money for things like a room and board, books, other things that the eligible students can apply for, and we're showing a $2.5 million increase for that. Now, I think most of you all know this, but as a reminder, central accounts is where we hold a lot of adjustments that deal with centrally funded items. So salary increases, retirement adjustments, workers' compensation adjustments, rent and VITA cost, all come in central accounts. And so in the budget, some of the highlights there are that 2% per year for state employees and local government employees that are supported by the state. And the other big one is about $243.5 million to account for growing cost increases for the state employee health insurance. That is, of course, just the general fund side. Non-general fund agencies will have to cover elements of that cost also. I do want to point out again, like in K-12, because of the good results in Virginia retirement system, our cost to support the state agencies on that have gone down, generating over $145 million in savings. And water quality, this, a lot going on. The General Assembly has put a lot of money and effort in this, and we've seen some good results with more still needed. The proposal in the budget is to add 144 more million to general fund, but also adding from the Water Quality Improvement Fund reserve an amount of 83 million, and assuming about $58 million in interest on the fund, that we can put in total 286 million towards agricultural cost share program and other programs that support that. And that covers much of the identified need for the biennium. In addition, nearly 141 million is put into the Water Quality Improvement Fund for the Enhanced Nutrient Removal Certainty Program at the Department of Environmental Quality. This will help cover our commitment to the Hampton Roads Sanitation District, who has made improvements to their wastewater system. And finally, 43.5 million general fund to the Stormwater Local Assistance Fund at also Department of Environmental Quality. And you may be familiar with municipal separate, I always get this wrong, municipal separate storm sewer systems permitted localities, and MS4 help cover their needs for 27. Economic development. We expect our commitments we've already made for economic development projects that we need to budget over 45 million to help cover those costs. Proposal for 35 million to complete design and perform necessary site improvements for an inland port at Washington County. 35 million also for the second phase of University of Virginia's Institute for Biotechnology. And finally, an additional 10 million for business-ready sites and 5 million for the sports tourism incentive grants under Virginia's Tourism Authority. Finally, last but not least, public safety. Nearly 96 million general funds provided to support 3 basic trooper schools of approximately 100 troopers, cadets per school. Not quite 60 million to cover increased medical costs at Department of Corrections. Over 30 million general fund to provide the next IT transformation stage at state police, as well as enhanced disaster management support at the Department of Emergency Management. Over 9 million to support local sheriff's offices, and over 9 million to provide the startup costs for the newly opened Polar Veterans Care Center in Northern Virginia. Although not showing in my bullets, I do want to point out that in the Virginia court system, we did budget 40.8 million general fund to deal with the expected forecast for the criminal fund, which pays for indigent and voluntary mental commitment fund, which pays for indigent defense in our court system. Now, I know you've already heard some of this with the capital, but just highlight real fast. 890 million general fund, 1.1 billion in state-supported bonds, $2 billion. This is a whole listing. I won't go through all of them, but just the highlights real quick. 400 million general fund over the biennium for maintenance reserve, nearly 80 million for maintenance reserve, maintenance, infrastructure, life, and safety needs at facilities, nearly 52 million for equipment for new facilities coming online, 354 million general fund, and nearly 943 bond debt, state bond debt for 8 new buildings or expansions. And as noted in the governor's speech, the UVA Center for the Arts was intended to be in, but did not get in, and we would appreciate you considering it for when you develop the budget. I wanted to just quickly show you the total debt, because even though most of it is in the capital, there is 195 million in there for the Hired Equipment Trust Fund, which is a very valuable program for our higher institutions. We've always used debt for it, and it shows up, though, in the operating side of the budget if you're looking for it under education. Finally, I'm at the end of my presentation, but I'll leave you with a summary of the proposed general fund appropriations. In my world, we call things budget drivers. These are basically items of note where there's either been significant funding increases or people over time, or people care deeply about it. And so this is our way of showing you those budget drivers and the incremental funding that they all got in this proposed budget. And all this does is show you the actual dollar amounts in those budget drivers so that you can see the total amount of funding. Finally, if you go to Planning and Budget's website, we have the required budget document, and that document will give every single change that we are proposing in this budget, both for the caboose and for the big bill. And certainly if you have any questions, we will do our best to answer them, though I know your staff is also in contact with us and will be making sure they understand what's going on. And Mr. Chairman, that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, sir. We're going to take a moment here and take a few questions. And I know that there's another event that starts at noon. So,
Mr. Chair, I've got a quick question.
1 second, please. We're going to take questions up until 11:30. Those of you who have questions, if you have long questions, you're going to be eating up somebody else's time. So please be aware of that. The first person that I saw that signed up was Senator Servell, then Senator Deeds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got a quick question for Secretary Cummings. Thank you, Secretary. First of all, I just want to thank you for your service to the Commonwealth. Appreciate the 4 years you've served. We sometimes don't see Secretary serve all 4 years, and you've been there all four, so
Thank you.
appreciate that. Again, I was struck by your report and the rosy nature of it, as I'm sure you're not surprised. Yeah. I was reading the ODU State of the Commonwealth report that came out, I think it was yesterday, the day before, and the AI summary, I've read of it, says that Virginia's economy has slowed, showing a declining workforce, increased weekly unemployment complaints compared to last year, reduced trade through the Port of Virginia. Evidence suggests a general deceleration of economic activity in Virginia. The labor workforce has shrunk. More people unemployed and seeking work each week in 25 compared to 24. The federal impact is killing Northern Virginia. The port is down. Consumer sentiment is very negative. Outlook for 2026 is very dim, with projections for reduced growth and economic diversification urged for resilience. That's an annual report they put out every year, not my words, theirs. And I'm just curious why, this entity we have that focuses on our state economy every year that we charge to do it has such a radically different view of the state of the Commonwealth as compared to you or your administration, I would say.
Yep, not surprising. Thank you. And I've heard him speak several times, and reserve my comments on how that view does develop. I've got 20 pieces of data in my presentation that I would ask you and him to explain how we could possibly have the outcome we have, given what he's saying. Because this is fact of numbers of state collections, it's unemployment claims, it's revenues coming from sales tax. How do you explain any of what I've told you? What bothers me the most when you say you have this rosy view, I am delivering data. It's not a rosy view, it's data. And I will be happy to send him a list. I've spoken, not to him, I've spoken to other economists and said, how do you explain why our withholding is doing what it's doing and I'm not saying, you didn't write it, but when he is saying what he's saying, it can't possibly be right. One of us has to be wrong, and I know our numbers are not wrong. So I can't explain it, and I have some of my own theories. I'll keep it to myself, but anyway, Virginia's rocking, and it's only been stronger more recently. It is clearly slowing. We came out of pandemic, and it was taken off, but it is clearly slowing. The economy is stabilizing, but if you didn't know we had federal exposure, you would think we have great things going on, and we've had federal exposure since they started announcing DOGE cuts back in the first calendar quarter of this year. Where is it? Inflation hasn't gone up. It hasn't gone down, but it hasn't gone up. So I'd love to have that. I'd love to send a list of questions because I really, if that's what he says, he has to explain why the true outcome says what it says.
Thank you.
Senator Dees.
Special Secretary, I'd love to have you and Mr. McCabe debate. I'd like to hear from both of you because he's been around for an awful long time and has a lot of
He's
nonpartisan.
been consistently wrong since I've been here. Always, and it's not ever on the upside, I will tell you that. It's always on the downside.
I get it. Both Mr. Maul and the governor gave plaudits to UVA. I appreciate you throwing a few bones that way. But if it was supposed to be in the budget, why is it not in the budget? What impact will it have on the budget? What will it throw the budget out of balance? And where do you get the money?
Yep. Budgets are a long and complicated thing, and it is where it is, and we have borrowing capacity if we don't have cash to be able to do a project that we're supportive of. It's a good project.
Delegate Lawfer.
Thank you very much. My question would maybe be for Michael, Mr. Maul. In the presentation about Health and Human Resources proposal, I am the chair of the Disability Commission, and the concern with the re-benchmarking of funds for the developmental disability waiver, I'm just curious if those funds were only due to the Guidehouse study, or did you expand into all sectors of the disability waiver? Does that make sense to you?
My understanding, unless my associate director tells me otherwise, that it was just for the,
Guidehouse study?
yes.
Then I just want to mention that I think people
Yes.
are concerned that if we're only looking at those areas, that we're not getting a full picture of what the re-benchmarking will be for all of the services. So I just want to put that out there, that we may have to look at this again.
Understand. Thank you.
Senator Borsco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding the $59.3 million to support the cost of increasing developmental disability services rates, does that include all of the services provided? Does it include just some of them? Could you clarify that?
I mean, it's basically for rates. Yeah, for services. Yeah, it's for the ones that, as Delegate Lawfer was talking about, and increasing the rates to ensure that the people providing the services are as well compensated as possible to encourage them to provide those services.
But could you, Mr. Chair, could I just a follow-up? Just a quick. Could you just clarify, is that all of the services that are currently being offered, or is that a portion of them?
Yes. I would prefer, we're going to have to do a lot of back and forth on this. How about afterwards, we try to answer that for you? I think that would make it easier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Delegate Hayes.
Thank you so much. My question is for Secretary Cummings. Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary, for your presentation. One of the questions that I have is in regards to monetization of digital assets. I didn't hear any comments, any proposals, nothing around that area. And then the second part of that is separate and distinct in that an observation for the increased purchasing or sales that have occurred. Could it be that now that we are in a place where over 98% of folks have these devices, that they're making their purchases now online? It's so convenient.
I'm sorry, the first part of that last question was explaining what?
Well, the question was, I didn't hear anything in regards to
digital assets. I got that. The second question, I want to make sure I understood that.
the second part was just making an observation about online sales, and that earlier you mentioned something about the phenomenon of the sales continuing to go up.
Yep. Okay. Good question. Digital assets, we've talked about it. And there are other states that are not here. I'm saying we as a team have talked about it. We've had time with the governor looking at this. And we have purposely said, let's wait and see. Let's watch what happens. Other states have been accepting digital assets as a form of payment. It comes up in unclaimed property, which is an issue that's quite complicated. And we all believe that it's something that we should watch others lead with, and it's not really a priority for us to be out in front on. So I know not all people agree with that, and maybe it's because of my age as part of that. But on the sales and use tax, I understand. I don't think the online purchases is a new thing. I think just more stuff is shifting to that consumption-wise, and I don't think that that's driving an overall growth in consumption by consumers. That people have their money, they have their credit cards, and they have their limits about how they manage that. So I think most people have a budget around those things. It is definitely easier to do it, but I don't think that that's uniquely explaining Virginia. And if you look at national stats, then you would see that actually we're doing better than national data would suggest. And I do think it's got to be tied to the health of the consumer in Virginia, frankly. So I don't think that drives the overall outcome. Thanks.
Chair Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Well, Michael?
Well, if I could, before I ask a specific question, I will observe that the sources that I keep listening to again and again, and there are many national sources, the growth in consumer spending is in the upper income. And that's what's driving it in this K curve that we're in, and it's not at the lower income. And I just wanted to emphasize that besides whatever might have been ahead of time tariff buying. But my question was, as you emphasized the federal job loss situation, I agree that we're in a good position because of military and security profile that we have. When you look at the loss of tax revenue because of loss of jobs, are you really looking at the fact that you gave us just the unemployment figures, which are filed in DC if that's where you're working, even though you're paying your taxes in Virginia and will lose the revenue? Are you making that kind of attempt to find out what our tax revenue loss will be?
Yes. Great question. And we have a phenomenal tax team. And I'm sorry I forgot Kristen's last name before. Kristen Collins, thank you. And our revenue team, well. Charles Kennington and Peter Elverson, are fantastic. They do deep dives on great detail. And the numbers I show you are federal employees who reside in Virginia, which we think is largely driven by where the place of work is, not all, because I think...
Not in Northern.
I think, well, so you're suggesting that the agencies in Virginia, because, no, let me step back. Let me state my data first. We have about 190,000 federal employees who work in Virginia. The federal employees who live in Virginia is about 40 to 50% higher than that number. That's what we're tracking. Okay, that's the cohort. So we're trying to get to the real truth of you pay where you live, not where you work.
Thank you. I
That's what the
appreciate
data's
that.
based on. Yep.
Delegate Tran.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I think I just want to pick up on this thread. I was really concerned, I feel, about the intentional downplaying of the effects of the federal workforce cuts on Virginia and on Virginia families. So I'm just going to give you a couple of scenarios that I've heard from my own constituents. Of a household where both working adults are federal employees and now have no income and are applying for free or reduced lunch in order to make sure that their kids get a hot meal during the school day. I just got an email this week from a spouse, an individual whose spouse is now 5 months into their illegal reduction in force, and they have exhausted their savings. We know that if you take the reduction in, if you took the fork in the road, you may not show up in the UI data because you may not be qualified to receive unemployment insurance. So the data that you're looking at might not tell the full picture. We also recognize that federal workers and contractors are about 20% of Virginia's workforce. And what do you say to them that the impacts of these cuts are not catastrophic? How do you tell these families that, so glibly, that it is not catastrophic, that everything is hunky-dory? Thank you.
Thank you. I by no means intend to downplay the impact on individual families, and I apologize for that. I should have prefaced everything I said with that comment. I have family members who have lived through being laid off. I know what that is like, the impact on a family, so I apologize, and you think that I'm being insensitive to those things. But I'm looking at broad data, and if you look at unemployment insurance claims, you look at actual withholding payments, it would suggest that as a group, we're not seeing the impact that everybody had expected. With respect to those people who have lost their jobs, I think what's been done in Virginia Works to help them find new jobs it's been all hands on deck, and that people are trying to help out as best they can. I think inevitably there are going to be people who are put in a very difficult position and have to make some very tough decisions. And I do think that I go back to the data, which is I live in data probably more than I should, but trying to look at broad numbers and what does this mean for Virginia, understanding that it's definitely not the same for everybody.
Delegate Sickles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On Medicaid, I think I heard the governor say that he had established cost controls in Medicaid, and I paid close attention to that program, and I was unaware of that. But then this is a question for Mr. Mall, because the budget recommends cost controls in Medicaid, and you had a number on it and went over it real fast. Could you explain what those are? So this is actually a question for Mr. Mall. What are the new cost controls in Medicaid that you're
Delegate Sickles, I apologize in that. I would recommend, there's quite a few, that there's a long list of things of various sizes, and I would love it if we could have my folks and your folks sit together and go over all of them so you can see every single detail. I think they're going to be provided so you can see that.
Follow, Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Sickles.
These are new. These are new.
Yes, these are brand new.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, that is why you haven't seen them before.
Look forward to learning about them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. This concludes our presentations and Q&A for today. Members of Money Committees, thank you very much. Mr. Secretary, thank you. We stand adjourned.